The Dark Ignis, born from Yusaku Fujiki's data during the Lost Incident. As fate would have it, years later he was captured and held hostage by his counterpart against both the Hanoi and Seoul Technologies, but the two eventually became friends in fighting such forces together. But when Bowman had consumed all of the other Ignis, our dynamic duo had to defeat him in a duel, causing I to become the last Ignis standing. Wrecked with grief, I went rogue, taking over Seoul Technologies to mass-produce copies of himself. He then challenged Playmaker to a duel. If he won, the copies would awaken. If he lost, he would be erased. Either option would cost I his own life, however. Despite his defeat at Yusaku's hands, I did manage to come back through the Duel Links memory system, which has also begun to revive the other Ignis. I played a deck of Ignister monsters, which are based off of him and the other Ignis. Starting off, we have Doyon, Achichi, Hiyari, Doshin, Bururu, and Pikari at Ignister. When Doyon is summoned, it can add an Ignister from the grave to the hand. If it's sent to the grave as Cyberus Link material, it can add an Eye Speller Trap from the grave to the hand. When Achichi is summoned, it can add a low-level Ignister from the deck to the hand. At the start of the damage step, when the player's Cyberus monster battles, Achichi can banish itself from the grave to destroy the player's battling Cyberus. If the player controls an Ignister monster, Hiyari and Doshin can summon themselves. Hiyari contribute another Cyberus to search out a high-level Ignister from the deck, then this card becomes level 4 for the turn. If the player tributed a Link monster to activate this effect, Hiyari can search out Eye's Ritual. Doshin can target a Cyberus Link in the grave and return it to the extra deck to search out I Love Fusion. When Bururu is summoned, it can send an Ignister from the deck to the grave. When Bururu is sent to the grave as Cyberus Synchro material, it can summon another monster that was used as material from the grave. When Pikari is summoned, it can add any Eye Speller Trap from the deck to the hand. Once per turn, Pikari can target another Ignister and change that monster's level to 4. The cards that Hiyari and Doshin search are Eye's Ritual and I Love Fusion respectively. Eye's Ritual summons any Cyberus Ritual and tributes Ignister monsters from the hand or field whose total levels equal or exceed that of the Ritual monster. Or, if the player controlled an Ignister when this effect was activated, it can also banish Ignisters from the grave as material too. I Love Fusion summons a Cyberus Fusion using monsters from the hand or field as material. If the player uses an Ignister monster as material, this card can also use a Link monster the opponent controls as material. The monster meant to be summoned with Eye's Ritual is none other than Water Leviathan Ignister, which is the first of our empowered forms of each of the base 6 Ignister monsters that are also inspired by the other Ignis. If Water Leviathan is ritual summoned, it can return all of the opponent's monsters with 2300 or less attack to their hand. Once per turn, Water Leviathan can target a face-up monster the opponent controls, and return all Link monsters from the grave to the extra deck to change that target's attack to 0. Once per turn during damage calculation if Water Leviathan battles, it can halve the attack of the opponent's battling monster. For two other Dark Ignisters, we have Don Yoribo and Don Mari, both of which represent different parts of Eye's history as an Ignis. During damage calculation when an Ignister battles, Don Yoribo can discard itself to nullify the damage from that battle. When an Ignister monster effect or Eye back row is activated and that card inflicts damage to the opponent, Don Yoribo can banish itself from the grave to double that damage. When an attack is declared involving an Ignister, Don Mari can summon itself from the hand to negate that attack. If the player controls a Link 6 monster, Don Mari can banish itself from the field or grave to negate an opponent's face-up card for the turn. And for two big Ignisters that seem to take inspiration from Bowman's Hydrodrive archetype and Pandora's Topologina archetype, we have Gachiri and Gusari Ignister. While in the field, Gachiri protects the player's Cyberus monsters from being destroyed once each turn. Gachiri has 2 listed effects and it can use each once per turn. The first targets a Cyberus effect monster the player controls, negating its effects to summon this card from the hand. If Gachiri is sent from the field to the grave, it targets a face-up monster the player controls and makes it unaffected by the opponent's card effects until the end of the opponent's turn. When a Link monster is destroyed in battle, Gusari can summon itself from the hand. When the player's Link destroys an opponent's monster in battle, Gusari can burn the opponent for the destroyed monster's original attack. Lastly, when an attack is declared involving the player's Link and an opponent's monster, Gusari can banish itself from the grave to make the attack of both monsters become 3000. But for our 4 newest Ignister monsters that came out last year, we have retrains of Link Kuriboh, Backup Secretary, Cyberse Wizard, and Link Slayer, all of which are classic Cyberse monsters that Yusaku and I used together during their adventures, now reimagined as Ignister monsters. Kurikorinku Ignister contribute another Ignister to summon itself from the hand or grave, but it gets banished when it leaves the field. When a card or effect targets a Cyberse the player controls and the player controls a Cyberse that was summoned from the extra deck, Kurikorinku contribute itself to negate that effect. Backup Ignister can summon itself from the hand if the player controls a Cyberse that was summoned from the extra deck. When summoned, she adds a Dark Cyberse monster from the deck to the hand, then discards a card. If the player controls a Cyberse from the extra deck, Wizard Ignister can summon itself from the hand alongside a Dark Cyberse from the graveyard. Wizard can banish itself from the field or grave to target an opponent's monster and change its battle position. Link Slayer Ignister can use itself from the hand as Link material if another Cyberse on the field is used as Ignister Link material. If Link Slayer is sent to the grave as Link material, it can discard a card to target a spell or trap on the field, or 2 if it was used as Link material from the field and destroy those targets. But we are a little short-handed on monsters, so for 4 other Cyberse monsters, let's check out Mad Hacker, Proxy Horse, Meowsclick, and Ram Claudia, which I think is fitting as a dark version of Ram Clouder. If a monster is summoned to the opponent's field, Mad Hacker can summon itself from the hand. Mad Hacker can banish itself to take control of the opponent's monster with the lowest attack, and while that monster is face up on the field, that monster can't activate its effects, and the player can't summon from the extra deck besides Links. If Proxy Horse is used as Cyberse Link material, it can allow a Cyberse in the hand to be used as Link material as well. During the end phase, Proxy Horse can banish itself from the grave to return 2 Link monsters, including a Cyberse, from the grave to the extra deck. If a field spell is activated, Meowsclick can summon itself from the hand. Then, if there are face-up cards in both field zones, it can't be destroyed that turn. During the player's turn, Meowsclick negates the effects of the opponent's face-up field spell, but during the opponent's turn, it negates the effects of the player's field spell. When Ram Claudia is normal summoned, it adds a Cyberse from the grave to the hand. If Ram Claudia is destroyed, it summons a low-level Cyberse from the deck. On to some generic support before we get on to the features. Let's take a look at spell cards Link into the Vrains, 1 Curry Way, Link Bound, and 0 Extra Link. Link into the Vrains summons a monster from the hand with its effects negated, then immediately Link summons a monster using monsters the player controls, including the summoned monster. The summon can't be negated, and the opponent can't activate cards or effects when the monster is summoned. If a Link the player controls is destroyed, this card can be banished from the grave to add another monster with the same original type as the destroyed Link from the grave to the hand. 1 Curry Way targets a Link 1 in either grave and either returns it to the extra deck or summons it to the owner's field. Link Bound returns a Link from the field or grave to the extra deck, then draws cards equal to that monster's Link rating, but it returns cards from the hand to the bottom of the deck equal to the number of cards drawn. 0 Extra Link targets a Link monster that's co-linked with one in the extra monster zone, boosting it by 800 attack for each Link on the field. If a Link is summoned using target as material, that monster gains the same attack increase until the end of the turn. After damage calculation, if the target attacks, 0 Extra Link is destroyed. If the player takes damage from the opponent, Cyberse Beacon can search a low-level Cyberse from the deck. Now on to I's Eye back row. We'll start with his field spell, Ignister Eye Land. If the player controls no monsters in the main monster zone, this card can summon a low-level Ignister from the hand, but the player cannot summon another monster of the same attribute by this card's effect for the rest of the turn. If Eye Land is in the grave, it can banish an Ignister from the grave and set itself back on the field. For the purposes of other cards, we'll also be giving Eye a second copy of Ignister Eye Land. For Eye's normal spells, we have Eye Meet You, Eye Contact, Fighting Spirit, and Eye Connect. Eye Meet You reveals a Cyberse with 2300 attack in the hand or extra deck, and adds an Ignister with the same attribute from the deck to the hand. During the end phase, if the player didn't special summon the revealed monster or one with the same name, they take 2300 damage. Eye Contact activates if Ignister Island is in the field zone, and reveals another copy in the hand to place that copy on the bottom of the deck and draw 3 cards. Fighting Spirit summons an Ignister from the grave. This card can also be banished from the grave to protect an Ignister with 2300 or more attack from being destroyed by a card effect. If this card is banished, it can prevent Ignister monsters with 2300 or more attack from being destroyed in battle that turn. Eye Connect reveals a Cyberse in the hand and applies an effect based on that monster's attribute. If dark, it summons the revealed monster and searches out a low-level non-dark Cyberse. Any other attribute, and the revealed monster gets shuffled into the deck to search an Ignister with a different attribute. For 2 quick plays, we have Idol Reborn and Tie Strike. Idol Reborn summons an Ignister from the grave. When an attack is declared involving 2 monsters, this card can banish itself from the grave and another card from the hand to add another eye back row that is banished or in the grave back to the hand. During damage calculation, Tie Strike makes the player's battling monster become equal to the opponent's monster's attack, and the controller of any monster destroyed in that battle takes damage equal to their monster's original attack at the end of the damage step. This card can banish itself from the grave to prevent an Ignister from being destroyed in battle. For our last spell card, we have You and I. If a Cyberse with 2300 original attack is special summoned, this card applies an effect based on that monster's attribute, and it can only use each of its effects once per turn. For Earth or Water, it halves the attack of a monster on the field for the turn. For Wind or Light, it negates the effects of a face-up card on the field. And for Fire or Dark, it summons an Ignister token, a level 1 Dark Cyberse with 0 attack and defense. On to Eye's traps, we have the normal trap Eye's Show and Sidekick. Eye's Show activate if the player controls a Link 3 or higher Ignister in the extra monster zone when the opponent declares an attack. It summons any number of non-Link Cyberses with 2300 attack, whose combined attack is less than or equal to that of the attacking monster from the extra deck. Then the battle phase ends. Sidekick targets cards the opponent controls up to the number of Cyberse monsters with 2300 attack that the player controls and negates their effects for the turn. This card can be banished from the grave to summon one of the player's banished Cyberse monsters. Lastly, we have Eye's Continuous Traps. Eye Challenge You, Eye Q, and Eye Shadow. Eye Challenge You debuffs the opponent's monsters by 100 attack for each card the player controls. If the player's Ignister battles, the opponent can't activate cards or effects until the end of the damage step. When the player's Ignister is destroyed in battle, Eye Challenge You can summon a different Cyberse with 2300 attack from the grave. IQ activates only if the player controls an Ignister and has a maintenance cost of tributing a Link monster during each of the player's standby phases, otherwise it's destroyed. This card makes it so that each player can only Link summon once per turn while this card is face up on the field. Eye Shadow targets an Ignister and boosts it by 800 attack. The opponent's monsters are also forced to attack the target if able. If Eye Shadow leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect and is in the grave or banished, it can draw a card. Starting off the side deck, we'll acknowledge Eye's power to whip up data storms by giving him Cynet Storm and Cybersal Cyclone. Storm boosts all linked monsters on the field by 500 attack and defense, and prevents the Link summons of Link monsters from being negated. Once per chain, if the player takes 2000 or more damage, this card can shuffle the face-down cards in the player's extra deck, excavate the top card, and summon it if it's a Cyberse Link monster. Cyclone targets a Link the opponent controls and banishes one from the grave that has the same Link rating to destroy the target. Then, if the banished monster was Cyberse, Cyclone can destroy an opponent's face-up back row as well. Up next, since Eye plays all of the summoning methods, I thought it'd be neat to give him Sextet Summon. It banishes from the hand, grave, and or face-up field one each of a Ritual, Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, Pendulum, and Link with the same original type to summon a monster from the deck or extra deck with the same original type as those monsters. But wait a sec, Pendulum? Are there even any Cyberse Pendulums? Why yes, there is exactly one, and the second we get another generic Cyberse Pendulum, I'll add it to Eye's side deck alongside this next card. Anti-Human Intelligence Mi Sai Ya. Its pendulum effect banishes any non-monster that would otherwise go to the grave. The usable part of its monster effect states that if another monster is summoned while the player controls this card, that monster gets sent to the grave during the end phase of the turn. For 3 Link-related spells, we have Link Back, Link Hole, and Link Burst. Link Back targets a Link in the extra monster zone and moves it to a main monster zone that it points to. Then the player can send cards from the top of their deck to the grave equal to that monster's Link rating. Link Hole activates if the player controls a Link 4 or higher monster, destroying monsters the opponent controls up to the number of Link 3 or higher monsters the player controls. Link Burst targets a Link the player controls and a monster the opponent controls, destroys both, then draws a card. For some generic support from the World Legacy, we have Succession, Struggle, and Sorrow, which I think helps embody Ai's survivor guilt. Succession summons a monster from the grave to a zone a Link points to. Struggle targets and destroys back row on the field up to the number of co-linked monsters on the field. And Sorrow negates the activation of an opponent's card effect while the player controls a co-linked monster, destroying that card. For 3 more Link support spells, we have Blink Out, Star Power, and Parallel Panzer. Blink Out returns a Link on the field to the extra deck, then it can summon one of its Link materials from the player's grave. Star Power activates during damage calculation when the player's Link battles, boosting it by the levels and ranks of the monster it points to times 400, boosting it by the total levels and ranks of the monsters it points to times 400. Parallel Panzer equips to a Link. Once per turn, it can move that monster to a main monster zone that it points to on the player's field. Parallel Panzer can send itself to the grave to destroy a card in the same column as the monster that was equipped. And closing out the side deck, we have 2 more traps, Saryuja's Shackles and Shield Handler. Saryuja's Shackles targets a Link the opponent controls or has in their grave and draws cards equal to its Link rating. But if the player then has 2 or more cards in their hand, they have to place 2 cards from their hand on the bottom of their deck. Shield Handler activates when a card or effect would destroy a monster on the field. It targets a Link monster on each field, negates the effects of the opponent's targeted monster, and equips to the player's targeted monster, protecting it from card effect destruction. Starting off Ai's extra deck, we have his old pal Link Kuriboh and its edgier counterpart, Linguriboh. The former is summoned using a level 1 monster, and when the opponent's monster attacks, Link Kuriboh contributes itself to change that monster's attack to 0 for the turn. If it's in the grave, Link Kuriboh contribute a level 1 to summon itself back during either turn. Linguriboh, on the other hand, is summoned using a low-level Cyberse. When the opponent activates a trap, it contributes itself to negate that card's effect and banish it. If Linguriboh is in the grave, it contributed an Ignister that was summoned from the extra deck to summon itself back during either turn. Before looking at more links, we first have to look at a new Synchro and Xyz monster, Firewall Saber Dragon and Code Igniter. If either are sent to the grave as Link material, they can add an Eye back row from the deck to the hand. Firewall searches a spell, Code Igniter searches a trap. Firewall Saber Dragon's materials are generic, and if it's Synchro summoned, it can add a Cyberse from the grave or banishment to the hand. Firewall Saber can also target another Cyberse with a level to make its level equal to that monster's. Code Igniter is summoned using 2 level 4s, and if it's Xyz summoned, it can search a Cyberse ritual. Code Igniter can also detach a material to conduct a ritual summon by attributing monsters from the hand or field whose total levels equal or exceed the ritual monsters. Up next is a card that's very important to the Ignis, G-Golem Crystal Heart, summoned using 2 Cyberse monsters. It can target an Earth Link in the grave and summon it to a zone that it points to, then gain a GG counter. Earth monsters co-linked to Crystal Heart gain 600 attack for each GG counter it has. Additionally, they can attack a second time each battle phase and deal piercing damage. One good Earth Link to pair this up with is Trigate Wizard, whose arrows work perfectly for setting up a co-link with Crystal Heart. It's summoned using 2 or more non-tokens, and gains effect based on the number of monsters co-linked to it. With 1 or more, it doubles the battle damage that monsters co-linked to it deal the opponent. With 2 or more, it can target and banish a card on the field once per turn. And with 3 or more, it can negate the activation of a card or effect and banish it once per turn. But one other Earth Link I could totally have access to is the ace of the AI that once threatened to consume the Ignis, Perfectron Hydra Drive Dragon. I think it makes sense for Ai to have access to this card if he was able to play Judgment arrows in the anime, which sadly doesn't exist yet. But I digress. Perfectron Hydrodrive Dragon is summoned using one or more Link monsters. When it's Link summoned, or at the end of the damage step when it battles, it can destroy as many monsters the opponent controls as possible, then burn them for 300 damage for each Link in the player's grave. While face up on the field, Perfectron is also Light, Water, Fire, and Wind attribute, meaning it's basically every attribute except Dark and Divine, and it's unaffected by the activated effects of monsters that share attributes with it. If Perfectron has 1000 or more attack and would be destroyed, it can reduce its attack by 1000 instead. But speaking of Bowman, we have the empowered forms of the other Ignis that he consumed to go along with Water Leviathan. These are Ignister's Earth Golem, Wind Pegasus, Light Dragon, and Fire Phoenix. Earth Golem is summoned using a Cyberse and a Link, and after its fusion summoned, the player takes no damage for the rest of the turn. If it attacks a monster from the extra deck, Earth Golem gains attack equal to that monster's original attack for the damage step. If Earth Golem is destroyed in battle, it can summon another Cyberse from the grave. Wind Pegasus' materials are generic, and during the main phase, it can destroy back row the opponent controls up to the number of Ignister monsters the player controls. If another card is destroyed while Wind Pegasus is on the field or in the grave, it can banish itself to target and shuffle an opponent's card into their deck. Light Dragon is summoned using 2 level 4s, and if a monster the player controls would be destroyed by a card effect, it can detach an overlay unit instead. Light Dragon can detach a material to destroy face-up monsters the opponent controls up to the number of Ignister monsters the player controls. When another Cyberse deals battle damage, Light Dragon can summon a Link from the player's grave. Fire Phoenix is summoned using 2 or more Cyberses, and during damage calculation if it attacks, it can burn the opponent for its own attack, but then the opponent takes no damage from the battle. If Fire Phoenix is destroyed, it can destroy a monster the opponent controls. During the next standby phase after it was destroyed while Link summoned on the field, Fire Phoenix can summon itself from the grave. And that brings us to the Ringleader, Dark Templar Ignister, based on Ai, summoned using 3 monsters with different names. If a monster is summoned to a zone it points to, even during the damage step, Dark Templar can summon as many low-level Ignisters as possible from the grave to zones it points to with their effects negated. When Dark Templar destroys a monster in battle, it can summon a Cyberse from the grave. One such monster that would help get the most out of Dark Templar's effect is Dark Infant Ignister, summoned using a non-Link Ignister monster. If it's Link summoned, it can search out Ignister Island. When a Cyberse with 2300 original attack activates its effect, Dark Infant can move itself to a main monster zone that it points to, then change its attribute to any other attribute for the turn. This in turn helps to summon Ai's big bad boss monster, the Arrival Cyberse Ignister, a whopping Link 6 summoned using 3 or more monsters with different attributes. Its original attack is 1000 times the number of Link materials used for its summon, and it's unaffected by other cards' effects. Once per turn, the Arrival can target another monster on the field, destroy it, and summon an Ignister token to a zone it points to. But the Arrival isn't Ai's last monster. After being revived and reunited with Playmaker through the power of Dual Links, ignore the fact that this card actually isn't in that game yet, we're speaking solely in terms of lore here, Ai took the best of Playmaker's Access Code Talker and united it into Allied Code Talker Ignister, a Link 5 summoned using 3 or more effect monsters. If it's Link summoned, it can summon as many Cyberse monsters with 2300 attack as possible from the grave to zones it points to, then gain 500 attack for each, but the player can't special summon for the rest of the turn. When the opponent activates a card or effect, this monster can tribute a Link it points to negate the activation and banish that card, but this effect can only be used once per turn. I like to think that this card foreshadows the memory system's revival of the other Ignis, as it has already done with Flame. Hopefully moving forward, Ai's dueling will no longer be so tinged by survivor's guilt. But that's just my theory on the deeper meaning of the card. Let me know what you think of this Ai character deck profile in the comments. But if you'd like to hear further explanation of the cards in this list, keep watching. Greetings, I am Wham Bam Duel, and welcome to the explanation segment. To those new to the channel, you may have noticed that the profile segment was rather similar to the deck profiles made by Spell Commander 91. This is on purpose though, as he and I are frequent collaborators, and we decided to bring everybody more deck profiles by splitting up some of the work. So to visiting viewers, welcome, and everybody else, welcome back. In addition to playing every Ignister monster and back row, I feel I did a pretty good job of filling in the gaps here. To start, I think Perfectron Hydrodrive Dragon is an entirely justifiable choice as a tertiary boss monster that I could go into. You can even summon it by just using Allied Code Talker, which I also think is kind of funny as well since they're both Link 5s, and Perfectron Hydrodrive only needs one Link monster if it's a Link 5. G-Golem Crystal Heart also had a whole subplot about its importance, so I don't think I would miss the opportunity to play it for the sake of Earth and Aqua. Trigate Wizard and Perfectron just so happen to play really well into it as well, so it works out nicely. I know that in the final arc, Ai's Linguribo kind of replaces the original Link Kuribo, but given the ongoing plot about all of the Ignis revivals and Duel Links right now, I think it's more than appropriate to allow our little Link 1 buddy the ability to feel joy once again. For the generic main deck Cyberse monsters, I felt like each of them had compatible theming and synergies. Mad Hacker is meant to be a sneaky reference to the Malice archetype, which is often paired with cards like Allied Code Talker in real life, and its control-based effect is somewhat helpful too, since this deck has a lot of links that are pretty easy to summon with just about anything. Like Dark Templar literally just takes 3 monsters. Proxy Horse is obviously a nod to Proxy Dragon, which is kind of sort of like half of Firewall Dragon in terms of stats, arrows, and lore. Its effect also offers easy link summoning and decent recovery. Meowsclick's effect works well with Ignister Island, as that field spell doesn't really do anything during the opponent's turn anyways, so it's practically just a free summon and field spell negation during the player's turn if the opponent has one face up. And yeah, I felt like Rom Claudia went along nicely with the Ignister retrains of classic Cyberses, since it's a dark version of Ram Clouder. In terms of the generic main deck back row, I wanted them all to be kind of referential to Ai's journey with Playmaker, with Link into the Vrains being an extremely obvious reference to the point of basically depicting Playmaker. One Curry Way, in addition to just being kind of decent in this deck, also depicts Link Kuribo and Linguribo's relationship, which I think is fun for the deck. Link Bound depicts 2 of the classic Cyberses that got turned into Ignisters, and just imagine fixing your hand by returning the Arrival from the grave to the extra deck and drawing 6. And Zero Extra Link is a card that Playmaker and I used in one of their duels against Revolver. Full disclosure though, if we ever get Judgment Arrows, I plan to replace this card with it. Cyberse Beacon was honestly just the 40th card in this deck, as I was trying to avoid giving Psynet cards outside of Psynet Storm for reasons I mentioned during the profile segment, as I felt like it'd make his deck a little too samey with the current Playmaker profile. That's also why he doesn't have any of the Code Talker or Firewall cards outside of the ones that specifically work with Ignisters and back row. And to explain the side deck, I know I'm going to get some comments about how pendulums don't exist in Vrains and I never played any pendulum monsters, to which I say these modern character deck profiles are meant to pull from all across the Yugiverse. And a card named Anti-Human Intelligence Messiah just screams Lightning, who I visited a decrepit copy of during the final season. If we ever get another Cyberse Pendulum, it'll join this card in the side deck to actually enable its special summon ability, or to set up a Pendulum summon. Right now, it's just there for Sextet Summon, which I think would be pretty cool for just randomly pulling out a Perfectron Hydrodrive Dragon. And all the other back row are basically just generic Link support, as I was trying to hold back on adding more Playmaker-related cards, though I feel like the World Legacy cards, particularly Struggle and Sorrow, go along well with the overall somber theme of Ai's deck. But that's just about all I have to say here, so I hope you enjoyed. Till next time, I've been Wham Bam Duel, and I'm always happy to see you.